working?
Ready.
We'll call this meeting to order. Board of Supervisors, Ventura County, for November 4th, 2008. Roberta, will you do the roll call, please?
Supervisor Long? Here. Supervisor Parks? Here. Supervisor Bennett?
Here.
Supervisor Flynn? Here. And Supervisor Foy.
Here. A moment of affirmation for Jim Duran, Pastor. I don't see him here, so we'll move on. But I think we have a card. Mr. Williams.
Psalms 109. Almighty God, whom I praise, you are not silent, for wicked and treacherous mouths attack me. The mouths of Noah Claybaum, the mouth of Peter C. Foy. Wicked and lying tongues they speak against me. With hateful words they surround me, attacking me without cause. In return for my love they slander me. For them, they repay me evil for good, hatred for my love.
Move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. Supervisor Flynn, would you like to lead us?
Please stand. Oh, sorry. Join me in the pledge of the flag. Ready to begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. We can vote. We have, did we miss a few?
Oh, there's one at the end. Okay, just, if everybody would just do a aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Okay. We'll move on to our agenda review with our CEO.
Yes, Chairman Foy. I've asked that consent item number 10 be moved to the regular agenda and heard as a regular item. Consent item 13, the Healthcare Agency VCMC, there's a corrected date on the board letter. Item 24, the County Executive Office, there's a revised board letter with a change on page 9, recommendation 11. And on page 11, and I believe you received copies of those, and they have been posted to the web. Also on item 24, there's a letter that we received from Kristen James and Polly Barrowman from Heal the Bay regarding recommendation number 3 on the board letter. And as an agenda item change only, there's a revised page 7. Item 31, Information Technology Services. Remove the language that said set second hearing and add CEO recommends approval as proposed. That's the
Okay, thank
total
you.
changes.
Do we have any other comments on this? Yes,
Yes,
sir.
I'd like to ask that item 16 be removed from the consent calendar. I have some suggestions for how we handle that.
Okay. And then, any other thing? All right. Do we have a motion?
Second.
Second. Okay. That worked. All right. So then we now have our consent items number 11 through 15 and 17 through 19.
Move the consent.
We have a motion. A second. Do you vote? Supervisor, did you get it? Okay. So there's you go. All right. Why don't we go to item number 10?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. What you have before you today is the request for the board's approval of our EEOP, the Equal Employment Opportunity Plan for the County of Ventura. We are required under federal law to submit this every 2 years. This is our 2008-2010 program year. It is our continued evaluation of the demographics of the community's workforce as compared to those actually employed by the County of Ventura. It's important to understand that the original documents we submitted to you, unfortunately, included the compiler programs for statistics. There really were only supposed to be the 3 attachments, and I'll advise you what those 3 attachments are. But before doing so, I want to be sure that we understand the focus of this plan is to reinforce our policy statement regarding the county's equal employment opportunity assurance for all of its employees and applicants for employment on the basis of fitness, merit, without regard to race, color, religion, national origin, disability, sex, or age. The county will and has followed this policy in its recruitment, hiring, and promotion into all classifications with respect to all matters of compensation, benefits, transfers, assignments, tour of duty, shifts, layoffs, return from layoff, demotions, terminations, training, educational leave, and social and recreational programs. The county has continued to maintain its place as a fair and equal opportunity employer, and we are fortunate in that in this county we have a remarkably diverse, qualified workforce to choose from. The statistics that we have on the 3 sets of data is the base data of those people available in the workforce in various work categories as identified under the community labor statistics. We then take the county's workforce and compare it to the available number of people in each category, and then we do a utilization analysis. That utilization analysis is provided for you on page 4, and it indicates where the raw statistics would indicate that we are underutilized, meaning that we have fewer number of people as a direct percentage representation as might be available in the workforce. The indications there are that in the majority of cases we have a less than 1% underutilization. In some cases we have a high utilization, a high underutilization, but that's the result of the fact that we're operating off the 2000 census. Won't have the opportunity to get our base community statistics changed until the 2000 census. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have regarding our utilization report and the efforts we make to ensure that we as an employer do sufficient outreach to draw people from every element of this community.
I appreciate the opportunity for us to take this off and you to come and give us a good explanation. Do we have any other questions or anything on this? Comments? No? Do we have any cards on this, Roberta? No? There is one. Laura Espinosa, you have to come up and speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Foy and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the members of SEIU 721. Just briefly, we've just recently reviewed the report. We think that there are several very good recommendations in the report. However, we would like very much to meet with your staff to review some of the impacts to our members. And other than that, we've had a very generous opportunity to speak with your CEO, and she was in agreement that that might be a good thing to do. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the CEO being open to speak with you. Any comments? Okay, that's it? All right, then we'll have a motion on this.
Nope, we've received that.
Okay. Supervisor, who do we need?
Supervisor Flynn seconded it. Correct.
I voted twice.
It's not allowed to do that, sir. We do it, okay. All right, now we're going to go to number 16. Supervisor Bennett?
Thank you very much. Item 16 is the transfer of funds from the road department, from the transportation department, to the Ventura County Agricultural Land Trust, commonly called VAULT. And the Agricultural Land Trust was created 13 years ago and with the idea of trying to purchase land in Ventura County. My understanding is this would be the very first funding that they're getting and be the first land acquisition that they're getting. So just a couple of things. Number one, I appreciate Mr. Britt being here because one of the questions I have is that this works out to be about $10,000 an acre, is that right?
Butch Britt, Public Works Agency, yes, sir.
Right, and $10,000 an acre, today's prices doesn't strike me that that will buy. How did we come up with the $10,000?
I think we attached the appraisal to the proposed agreement. We had an appraiser do an appraisal. Actually, with SOAR, even though land, and property prices dropping due to the economy, it was a representative appraisal.
Great.
If you'd like to give more, we can give more.
Right. Okay.
But I don't typically do that.
The question is, can they actually acquire? What can they actually do with it?
According to the president, they plan to leverage this with federal grant funds or state grant funds to purchase agricultural land. Right.
And what I would like to suggest to the board is that because this is a land trust that was formed 13 years ago, has not done anything in the 13 years in terms of actually acquiring anything. I like the people. I like the concept and everything else. I just want to make sure that the money doesn't sit there and not ever get used for agricultural preservation down the road. So what I wanted to ask County Council is, could we craft some language so that we would say that if in 2 years they haven't actually used the money to acquire anything, the money would revert back to the county, or at least come back for us to examine it. Is there something that we could do with this item to give us some sense of assurance that it'll motivate the Ag Trust to actually get moving and do all those appropriate things they're supposed to do? So, County Council, can you help me? I didn't have a chance to talk with you about this.
Well, reversion probably wouldn't work because that would fulfill the need of the county to mitigate. But there may be some other mechanism that could be agreeable to vault.
If I might interject, excuse me, the terms of the agreement do require them to make an annual report to the county on the use of the funds, and the funds are restricted to the agricultural land trust uses. So I think we do have, and we work with County Council on this agreement, I think we do have provisions. We can't ask for the money back because that would not, as Mr. Clavon said, meet the terms of our requirement to mitigate the impacts on agriculture, which your board did put on us. So we have to do that. This is a culmination of about a number of years of rather fruitless negotiations with the university, which we originally tried to mitigate the agricultural conditions on, and it does meet the terms of the mitigation condition, and we felt we were very working in a good posture by working with the agricultural land trust. I think we do have provision in the agreement that would protect the county from this money being used inappropriately.
Well, I'm not suggesting the money be used inappropriately. I'm just worried about the money being used. It's been 13 years and they haven't done anything. I just don't want it to sit there and sit there. If we got an annual report, it'd be pretty frustrating if we just kept getting the annual report. My next question for you, is there any timing problems here if we pulled this for a week, just so we could have County Council look and see if there's anything we could do? Obviously, like you said, we can't have the money revert back to us, but maybe there is something that we could work out in terms
I don't have a problem with that, sir. That's your discretion.
Okay. So anyway, that'd be my motion, is just that we pull this for. Okay.
That's fine. You have to do this through mitigation, right?
It is a required
There is
mitigation
required.
for the project, yes, sir.
And
There are a number of ways to mitigate it. This is one way to mitigate
and
it.
you have to give that price, or you come up with your own price?
We had an appraisal, doing an appraisal based on representative costs. It's very difficult to do because what you're buying is agricultural rights, not a piece of property.
Right.
And with SOAR and with the economy, agricultural rights have gone down.
They've diminished tremendously.
Yeah,
right?
and so we this is how we came up with the appraisal. Excuse me.
And that's part of the things that what you hope is that while prices are down, that the Ag Trust moves fast and actually acquires something. And so those are all the issues that I have. So I'd just like to make the motion that we pull this and let's make it 2 weeks, because if for 1 week, we'd have to have it done by tomorrow, right? For the board. So we'd pull this for the next appropriate meeting that we can get this done, and ask the CEO to work with Mr. Britt and County Council to bring this back to us, just with that concern, the concern being, what can we do to make sure that the Ag Trust will actually use the money to purchase something in the reasonably near future?
Reasonably near future being,
Well, 2 years is what I was talking about in terms of revision, but I would hope that within a 2-year period of time, they would get something done and have that conversation with them about what would be acceptable.
I would think you'd hope that they're just thinking there's money going to come, and they've kind of targeted certain things out there that they were looking for, so they could go right away.
But I'm just not certain of that. I mean,
half
after
the money
13
we were going to pay them won't arrive for at least another year to year and a half, because it's tied to the completion of the project.
Well,
So 2
I guess
years may not be
those are all the appropriate conversations that transportation can have with county council and the CEO's office. I'd just like to have something added for that particular provision. So,
No problem.
Aye, sir.
You want to come see us again anyway? Yes.
I also think 10,000 an acre is pretty low, so maybe while we're looking at that, I'd like to see the appraisals. I've heard from the agriculture industry how incredibly expensive it is for the land, and that's why they have to grow the highest commodity product out there, which is basically strawberries. So there is a big concern with the cost of land, even though we have depressed land values right now. So I'm interested in looking at that. But this also sets kind of a precedent in terms of how much we should acquire per acre when we develop agriculture land. And right now, I know Cal State Channel Islands is looking at taking 25 acres of agriculture land and making it into a parking lot. That needs to be mitigated also. So if we have something out there that says, what that mitigation cost is, I'd like it to be as realistic as can be. And I'm just questioning that cost right now. And also, I understand that we also use these kind of in lieu fees, for example, for affordable housing projects. Cities sometimes will allow a developer to provide money to meet requirements for affordable housing. And what happens often is the case is that they don't provide enough money and those units don't get built. So you end up having these trusts that go for years and years and years and years. So the idea that we are getting sufficient revenue for it so that you can actually go buy 10 acres somewhere in Ventura County and preserve them, which doesn't necessarily mitigate for the loss of ag land, but I think we need to at least have that ability to do that with the trust.
Do you want us to pay them more money? I don't understand.
Well, I wanted to ask that question because
I
we
want
got
to
to be
know
careful.
that it's a realistic number.
Excuse me, ma'am?
I want to know it's a realistic number, that somewhere in Ventura County you can go buy ag land at $10,000 an acre.
Well,
You're not buying the ag land, you're
Right.
buying
the rights. The rights.
the right.
Mr. Chair, I think I agree with continuing this for a couple of weeks. As long as there's not a timing issue for us, because we need, and this board said, this is the mitigation we wish to pursue. And as the Ag Land Trust has been voluntary these 13 years, it isn't that they haven't had an interest or made attempts, but it is a voluntary program. And I think it would be good to take a look at how we could put an incentive in the way of, at least a public report back or whatever we can do legally without jeopardizing the need we have for a mitigation measure. I think, as Mr. Britt mentioned, the $10,000 figure is just our piece of a leverage for hopefully other dollars, either from federal or state, that would allow the Ag Land Trust to purchase properties. And perhaps, it would be helpful to have some input from some of the leadership of the Ag Land Trust to see how they really believe this will help leverage that. I have to believe it will. Every dollar will help, but where do they see on the horizon the opportunity? Maybe.
I just might add, I would assume it's purchase of the development rights,
Right.
so that the property owner could, the farmer could continue to own the property, but agree to not develop that property.
You know, right there, there's an aggressive program with the Coastal Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy along the Santa Clara River Parkway project. There just has to be some opportunities here.
You got to finish your question, because I think you made a comment that was, you want me to pay more.
I didn't know.
And I want to
that
be
was
careful. I agree. We shouldn't pay more. We should. You have a hard enough time to find enough road funds to do your work.
Well, I mean, we had an appraisal made, and the Agricultural Land Trust agreed with that amount, and so I mean, we didn't carry it any further. If you want us to have another appraisal made, or we'll be glad to do that.
No. I think the mitigation should be the minimum mitigation we could do. So, all right, we had a motion, and did we have a second?
Yes, Supervisor Long.
Supervisor Long, did you second? Yeah, to continue this.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go on to public comments. Do we have some cards here? I do. Joseph O'Neill, please.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Mr.
sir.
Clavon. I'm Joe O'Neill. I'm the chair of the Democratic Central Committee. And this last week I read with mixed emotions that Phil is resigning, Mr. Phil Schmidt. I've known Phil for a long time. He's a man who brings a great deal of integrity as well as character to this county. And in the selection of a new county clerk, I just wanted to say a brief comment that we appreciate the service that Mr. Schmidt's staff has given us. We're sad to see him go, but it's kind of interesting that it happens right here on election day, or right in this period of time. It's just almost too coincidental for it to occur. So just the comment is that many of us are very interested in the process. We're also interested in a candidate very similar to Mr. Schmidt to come along, and we appreciate the fact that the county has always been so open with its election process. And just one last reminder for everyone to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you coming out. Carol Dean Williams. Can you all turn off?
Greetings, Peter Benedict Arnold Foy, traitor to the U.S. Constitution, First Amendment. Steve Bennett has left the room. The United States Supreme Court in 1989, 491 U.S. 397 said, quote, "If there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, it is that government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea offensive or disagreeable," unquote. The county council has ordered that corrupt sheriff should be the reason that deal is defeated, and he sits there in his same veiled hatred, Peter Foy. Oh, he gets to put on the government website that he's a successful website says he has some integrity. The big liar, the biggest liar sitting on the board, integrity. Yes, he has redefined all of these words. He has redefined
Sure. First and foremost, vote today. We have an opportunity today to do many good things for both our country and our county and our cities. And the best thing we can do is to exercise the rights that we have and to express and voice your opinion through the ballot box and through a vote. So encourage everyone to please vote. If the lines are long, think about how many times you stand in line at Starbucks. Yeah, no? Should be an easy one. This should be an easy one. I have a list to adjourn in memory of David Moss from Camarillo, and I call David Moss out because he was a very generous man. He donated the security systems that we have in place that are Safe Harbor East and West in the District Attorney's Office. He owned the business security systems, and he provided free technical support that was very helpful to our county in those Safe Harbor East and West offices, and great appreciation. And also on the list we have Francis Martinez, who is known and loved by folks in our county. I'll submit that list, and I guess as we go through our budget update today, we'll talk about the terrifying news coming out of the state, if that's the correct word. And one last thing, I wanted to, and I'll pass this around for the board to take a look at this. This is a practical guide for efficiently managing your green designed building. This was a document that was produced by an intern who worked for the Regional Energy Alliance this summer and put together a document for our nonprofit partners who particularly build housing, and to provide to their residents and to their the managers who are on site to really look at those buildings, and particularly with the Cabrillo Economic Development Corporation, where they have built a couple of buildings now that are green as far as the energy use and conservation and how they put them together. This document, again, developed by this intern this summer for the Regional Energy Alliance, is really very interesting, and very interesting in that it's succinct, easy to understand, and very practical in its application. So I wanted to share that with the board, one of the small but important things that the Energy Alliance is doing in the county. But it was great to have this student who came and captured this for us and provided a document for our housing advocates. And that's it, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Parks?
Thank you, Supervisor Long, for sharing this. I was at a conference, I believe it was APA, could have been LAFCO, in San Jose. Was it LAFCO? I think you were there too, but they did have a housing corporation that provided nonprofit affordable housing, and they actually were able to put in place a lot of green building, including one that I remembered, which was green roofs, which is planting rooftops. And they planted this particular rooftop on this affordable housing project with endangered butterfly habitat. So it was like, I'd say killing two birds with one stone, but that's not the appropriate expression. But they were taking care of both environmental as well as green issues, and doing it on affordable housing. I was able to attend a few things this weekend and over the week. Three supervisors, Supervisor Foy and Supervisor Bennett, myself, were able to attend the sheriff's graduating class from their academy, and that was always nice to see. I was also able to attend Many Mansions has something called Bowls of Hope, and it's pretty much an East County phenomenon, but I would really encourage other supervisors to attend that. It's a wonderful event. Volunteers make these beautiful bowls, and people come, and all the restaurants, some like 25 restaurants, all provide soup, and you get a nice bowl of soup, as much as you want, really, and it's very nice. And it's hundreds of people show, and they do it, I think, now twice a year, so that was a nice event, and raises money for affordable housing. And then finally, got to participate. The United Way joined with the Caneo Rec and Park District in providing a therapeutic dance for some disabled folks, and that was very nice to participate in also. I would also ask that the board close in honor of Estelle Reiner. She's a jazz singer, painter, and wife of comedy legend Carl Reiner for 64 years, died on Saturday at the age of 94. A talented artist and singer, Estelle was most widely known for the famous line, "I'll have what she's having," in son Rob Reiner's film, When Harry Met Sally. Her son Rob was pretty instrumental in helping us preserve Amundsen Ranch and also helped start the first 5. So good people, and I know she'll be sorely missed. So with that, concludes my comments.
Thanks, Supervisor. Supervisor Bennett?
Thank you. I'll try not to, it made me realize that, killing 2 birds with 1 stone has a lot more implications than I originally thought. But I'd like to ask the board to adjourn in memory of the people on this list. Supervisor Long made some reference to the scary stuff happening in Sacramento, but a budget that was just recently passed and supposedly balanced, I think we're going to find out is $10 billion, was actually off by $10 billion. I think that for everybody out there that works in public service, for the next few years, this is going to be a really difficult time. And people are already working hard and smart, and people are going to have to work harder and smarter. And we're going to have to really be creative as we try to work our way through all of this, try to make this work. The final thing I'd just like to offer is I've spent some time phone calling for a presidential candidate, and it is really interesting to see this country re-energized again on both sides when it comes to the issue of participation in the democratic process. But to have people talking about record turnout here in California, to have young people re-energized again about the political process is hopeful in the midst of a real crisis. And it seems like so often that's the case. In the middle of a crisis, that's when new people step forward and new energy comes forward and new solutions come forward, and we certainly need that. So I just want to welcome all of those young people, and it reminds me back in many ways to sort of the energy we saw in the 1960s that was out there with young people, and I welcome it and look forward to it, and we desperately need that shot in the arm. So thank you very much.
Supervisor Flynn?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to adjourn in memory and ask the board to adjourn in memory of the people on the list, which I'll submit to the clerk. And today is a great, exciting day. Finally, it's coming to a close, but people are waiting. I've never seen so much excitement on an election on every different issue you can think of, especially in the city of Oxnard. In my district, so many issues on the ballot that drew people out to corners of streets over the weekend with holding up signs. And one group, I won't say which side they were on Measure U, were out there in the downpour holding up signs. So this campaign, this election, has really brought out lots and lots of people, lots and lots of emotions. It's a great historic day for us in this country, and I'm so proud to be here and take part in the voting as I did this morning, and see the numbers of people turned out already, and the numbers of people voting absentee is just absolutely amazing. So we're on the right track. Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I, too, would like to adjourn in memory of the people on this list, and there's 2 of them, Paul Mees and Herbert Soering, who are some of our ones from the our great fathers who fought that Civil War. World War II. I was thinking of Civil War here because we had this reenactment, but that great generation. There's only a few left. Also, we do have in Moore Park the reenactment of the Civil War going on next weekend. It's one of the largest there is in the country. They get 7 battles a day, and it's a pretty interesting thing to go to. And there's hundreds and hundreds of people, and there's lots of people involved, and it's an interesting event. So that's available for everyone to go to. Also, talking about our budget, it was interesting. Last night I was doing some research on, because talking about this budget's going to be 10 billion, or somebody said 25 billion in 2010-11. But most of the country suffers through the financial issues we're dealing with, but California seems to have an interesting way of managing their budget. I was looking at Texas. Texas, when you look at their legislature, is about 50-50 Democrat, Republican, do that whole thing. They're a little smaller than us, 25 million people versus our 35 million, 39 million. But they have a mindset that's a little different than ours, that they should live within their means. And during this time, we look at a $10 or $20 billion deficit. They're looking at a $15 billion surplus. There is a way to, I mean, this, you know, there is an opportunity for all of us to have hope that if we have our representatives in the legislature do something that's right, we can hopefully get ourselves out of this issue and put our house in order and move forward. So there is that opportunity. Something else I want to talk about. Last week, I brought information on Prop 5 for us to vote on. I appreciate the ones who did vote that way. One of the things that the comment was, though, that we should look at not bringing propositions to this board. But I want to say that back in 2000, there was a board letter that came to this board. I want to pass one, that's what I know. And that talked about bringing propositions to the board. And I know you need these too. That talked about, and what are the reasons that you bring one? First of all, it says that this proposition was brought by Supervisor Long. The measure must have direct relevance to county government functions or responsibility, which Prop 5 tremendous involvement, and the measure must have direct fiscal impact, which we knew it was going to have a tremendous amount of impact. And then, so it was in accordance with this board that was done in the letter in 2000, and the other side of it was also in May of 2008, we did have another proposition brought to us, which is 98 and 99, for us here to vote on. And those were also something that was there for us to do. And here's a couple copies of this proposition, too. So I just wanted to say that I think Prop 5, and I appreciate, again, the board voting on that, but also to the point where that was, I think, the right thing to do, because there's also precedent of that being done. To do it. And I think any time when we have a major group of heads of our departments that are really concerned about what this is going to do to our county and our fiscal house and everything else, we should look at doing those kind of things. So anyway, those are my comments, and I thank you. Yes, sir.
Just two things I want to point out. I really appreciate your comments about Texas, and I think one of the things that if we're going to hold Texas up as a model, then I want to point out that Texas does not have a 2/3 requirement for passing their budget. And
That's right.
that may
And it
mean,
has a part-time legislature, too.
and that may mean, that may be a good idea. That may mean that they're much more accountable as a result of
correct.
it, you know, because whoever's got the majorities, you can hold their feet to the fire. That's one issue. And I appreciate your comments about the propositions and stuff. And since I'm the person who made that comment about that, number one, this was about 5 months after I got onto the Board of Supervisors.
Yes, I know it had nothing to do with you, right.
And
you might not have known it was there.
And subsequent to that, well, no, but subsequent to that, but and my point is that we should be, I think, extremely cautious about propositions in terms of bringing them forward, because we can slice and divide ourselves on all kinds of controversial issues that are out there. And I think you've seen that over and over again. And then pretty soon it goes to, well, what about national issues that are out there, and should we take those propositions? So all I was offering was a suggestion that we need to be really cautious about those and try not to go down the road very much.
No, and I think you're right. I
have a greater appreciation of that after my first time in terms of bringing propositions forward, and I haven't been heading that direction since then. So mostly it's just an overall. It's not an absolute by any means, but
I just wanted to make sure that we had it. It was in. It's been done, and it's within the perspective, I think, that the board brought it 8 or 9 years ago.
Let me comment that my vote on 5 was not over whether or not you should bring the issue to the board. It was for other reasons which I stated.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay. Why don't we then move on to our, since our first time certain doesn't happen for half an hour, we can probably get through most of this. Okay, regular agenda from our fire department, our fire protection district. Let's be precise here.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, CEO, Bob Roper, Fire Chief, Ventura County Fire Protection District. The item number 28 before you is to authorize myself to sign the sewer easement with the city of Simi Valley. This is a mistake that was done between the developer Shea Homes and the city of Simi as they deeded us the spot for the fire station at the north end of Simi Valley. What the city of Simi Valley has offered to do is to pay the time for public works engineers to process the legal easement across the fire station site. We were aware of it, but we didn't know that it was not recorded when we accepted the deed. So this is a matter of just simply house cleaning and cooperation with the city of Simi.
Great. So we have a motion? Can you believe they forgot to do that? I think that happens in private life too. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And let's go on to number 29.
Good morning, Chairman Flory, member of the board, members of the Board of Supervisors. Sorry about that, Mrs. Robinson. We have before you today a recommendation to commence public hearings on a modification to the CNA MOU. The modification would allow for nurses that promote into a management classification and then demote back into a CNA represented classification to have that time count towards their continuous service time in the CNA unit.
Okay. Any questions, comments? No? We have a motion? We have a motion. We have a second. Yes. We have a second reading coming up next week?
Next week.
Next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then we have number 30.
Morning, Chair Foy, members of the board, Executive Officer Robinson, Matt Carroll with the County Executive Office. Agenda item 30 requests your board approval of the county's Continuity of Operations Plan, version 1.0. Included within that plan is the provision that there be a single standby officer appointed for each of your board members should you be unable to serve in the event of a disaster or emergency. Additionally, item 30 requests approval of the use of live scan fingerprint imaging for the required background checks for those appointed standby officers. As background, you'll recall on June 24th of this year, your board was presented with a briefing on the status of the county's continuity of planning efforts, continuity of operations planning efforts. At the conclusion of that briefing, your board designated the the Camarillo Airport facility as the official alternate seat of government for county operations and your board, and directed the CEO's office to come back in the fall with the finalized county continuity of operations plan for review and approval by your board. The plan before you today, version 1.0, is primarily made up of 3 sections. Section 1 has information on plan authority, trigger events, activation, governance, and maintenance. Section 2, which is really the heart of the plan, describes 13 key areas of information that agencies and departments will need in the event of a disaster. Things such as what are your essential functions, what are the alternate facilities you're going to use to perform those essential functions if your main facilities are not available in an emergency, what are your supplies, what are your vital records, what are your information systems, what is the succession planning within each individual department. So that's really the core and the bulk of that 800 and some odd pages that make up the continuity of operations plan. And finally, the third section has supporting plans and activities for key county service providers such as general services, information technology services, and the County Executive Office's Human Resource Division. Now, based within that plan and based on interest expressed on the June 24th presentation, there is a combination succession option for members of your board, or combination succession strategy for members of your board. It's comprised of the appointment of 1 as opposed to 3, which are available to you, the appointment of 1 standby officer for each of you, and if that standby officer is not served, the succession strategy then would go into the generic succession strategy selection where the remaining members of your board appoint the standby officers, and if there's no members of your board, then we go into the head of jurisdictions within 150 miles and kind of decrementing size and population. So County Council has determined that the use of this combination of strategies is acceptable under state law. So that's what's contained in the plan. And as noted within the plan, or as noted within the board letter, Article 15 of the Government Code requires that a background check be performed for each potential standby official prior to their appointment. It doesn't describe how you will accomplish that background check, but it does give you the option of utilizing the Director of the Office of Emergency Services, in our case the Sheriff, to assist your board in executing those background checks. So with that as background, we're recommending that you utilize the live scan fingerprint imaging-based background check. That's the same background check required of sensitive employees in things like public schools, and therefore are there such. And it's conducted by the Sheriff's Office, and that would be the recommended means for performing those background checks. Now, the results, as recommended, would be provided exclusively to members of your board and the County Executive Office. They would not be public record, and they'd be provided exclusively for your use in your deliberations and decision. We're not recommending any passing criteria or minimum acceptance criteria in those background checks. Primarily, they be provided to members of your board, and you use them as you deem appropriate before you collectively come together and accept those appointments or approve those appointments. So that's the core of the plan and the background check. If your board, the issue on background check, if your board approves the plan this morning as presented, there'll be a follow-up where we actually conduct a tabletop exercise on the Monday following the statewide Golden Guardian exercise. That's in a couple weeks, 2 weeks from tomorrow, Thursday and Friday. The following Monday, we do a tabletop without members of your board. That'd be members of the executive committee and their COOP coordinators off-site. We conduct a tabletop. And then following that, on the following day, which is November 18th, we're tentatively planning it. We're about to firm it up or confirm it, but we are planning a brief tabletop exercise for members of your board as part of your November 18th exercise, where you'll get to exercise some of your roles in the COOP process.
And November 18th is already on our calendars.
It is on your calendar from November 18th. Okay. That calendar doesn't get finalized for a couple weeks, but it's booked at this point.
You've already cleared that November 18th.
Yes. Yes. And I just say it's tentative because at this point we're finalizing the script, and we want to give it to County Council, and Noel will bless it and say there's nothing we're asking you to do that's inappropriate at this point. So with that, we're requesting your board approve the continuity of operations plan as presented here this morning, including the standby officer succession methodology and strategy and the live scan fingerprint imaging approach to conducting the criminal background checks. I'm here to answer any questions, and Commander Dave Tennyson from the Sheriff's Department, if you have any questions on the criminal or the live scan fingerprint processing, is here to answer questions on that as well.
Okay. I get a question. If we do a background check and it has no criteria, what does it do for us?
Well,
when you do a teacher, they have a criteria. They can't be this, they can't do this, can't have this, right?
Right. Well, it gets into a lot of presumption on our part to come up with criteria, but the way we envision it, and Marty, if you'd like to jump in here, if there's is that a felony or something very obvious to members of your board, it's going to be very significant in your decision on whether to appoint that. But to say that's not allowed, or exactly what level of felony or what level of, I think a felony is a bad example because it's pretty clear cut. But if it's a misdemeanor, there's relatively serious misdemeanors and somewhat infractional or insignificant misdemeanors. So it would really be a judgment call on the deliberation of your board on whether you'd like to select a specific there.
It basically gives your board maximum flexibility without the interference of the appointed officials. So your board theoretically could identify criteria ahead of time if you wanted to, or you can look at them and then make the decision at that point in time. And this is added information to our original discussion around this whole appointment process, and I know that Matt in the letter has included the other approaches towards filling positions. So if that turns out to be uncomfortable, or whoever you appoint, that doesn't work out, we still have the fallback positions about how we proceed to fill these positions. Our original thought was, or certainly my original thought was, I was kind of surprised to hear that the board wanted to identify alternatives in advance, but that's certainly one of the options. And if you still want to do that, we can move ahead on this track. If you don't want to do that, you need to give us some other direction about the other alternatives.
Personally, I think it's great that we would know up front who would sit in our seat if something happened. I think that's a good thing. I was just curious on that. I mean, without, you can say I have it, but it doesn't mean anything. But I understand where you're coming from, flexibility. So it's up to us to come up with what that criteria means. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
Just a couple. One, this is version 1. Is that right?
You're actually, the beta version 1.0 is slightly modified and is online, but yes, 1.0.
Well, I would recommend that you put some dividers in here, so in the event of an emergency, you can get to the right page and at least get the sections down. I think that would be helpful. But it talks about the COOP committee and a COOP council, and I imagine they're the same thing, the continuity of government plan.
Well, the COOP committee is really kind of the working group. That's how we envision it. But in the activation of the COOP, all members of the executive committee become members of a larger COOP council.
Okay.
So we could use them interchangeably, but there's a slight distinction there.
And it's always good to have all that stuff clear, because during an emergency, you don't want people start pointing and taking leadership when it's not already spelled out. So knowing it's the council, not the committee, that's going to be the lead. I was looking at the who makes up the COOP committee or the COOP council, whichever it is. But I'm sorry. Just part 1, page 9. But it talks about it's made up of the assistant CEO who will direct the County of Ventura's continuity of operation. I think it's really important that whoever it is that says this is an emergency, we are now implementing our emergency plan. We all agree with who that is going to be, obviously. And this, to me, doesn't involve at all the Board of Supervisors. So I'm just wondering, maybe that is something that you might want the chair of the board to be sitting on that committee also, because when you're going to make a decision that's going to profoundly alter the functioning of government, it seems that that should be incorporated in there also. That's my thought. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks.
Yeah, as spelled out is the CEO who activates the COOP committee, and assuming that she is off with your board in the EOC or working the actual incident, it would be staff back at the office headed by the assistant CEO who would convene the committee, but certainly we'll take that into consideration.
And that's just my thought. It's up to the board, but it just seems to me it's such a humongous decision, and that is something that the board certainly should be part of.
CEO.
I was going to say that it's hard to sometimes distinguish between the actual incident, the emergency, and the declaration of the emergency, which everybody is involved in, and then how do we, each of our departments, who have had business operational plans for disasters in the past, we have just gone through the fairly comprehensive process of trying to put all of that information together and cause our departments to think about things outside the box that could occur that maybe they haven't thought of before. So the COOP committee is really for the continuity of operations somewhat post the disaster. It still may be within the actual point of a disaster being called, like the COOP committee would start getting themselves together to see how do we continue to do operations. Because at the same time, there's going to be a certain part of overlap. At the same time, the EOC is in operation, the Emergency Operations Center. You're going to have an Emergency Operations Center in which the board and probably the CEO are part of certainly the command structure or response of the command structure in that environment. And that's going to help us deal with the immediate disaster. And then we still need to have how, after the immediate response to the disaster, how do we, if we are impacted, how do we operationalize continuing to provide services? So the board is intimately involved in all points, and one of the things that we're sort of exercising is how, that's why we're going through this process right now about how does the board itself, the continuity of governance, how does that continue? And so one exercise today is for us to kind of know that that's on the horizon for figuring out how do we continue to do governance, and then the the organization, the institution needs to know how we're going to operate coming out of a disaster and moving forward. And so that's really what the focus of the COOP is, versus, the immediate disaster itself. Not that they won't necessarily overlap at some point in time, but that's what the focus is.
Okay, and that's just kind of, to me, I'm looking at making sure that within the first 4 hours, for example, and they talk about, you're going to have to activate this, just making sure you've got the leadership and everyone determined in advance. And at this
Right.
point, I'm looking at this as, I understand government's going to continue to function the best that we're going to be able to do it, but that, the board is involved in that also because we oversee.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Probably more than you need to know. And I think I'll just send you an email, Matt, on just some typo things that were picked up, using the word warming instead of warning. But question I have on also some corrections on pages and the training that's available for the department heads and the COOP coordinators. That's going to be the first step of that. Will be some of the exercise we're going to go through in the next month or so.
Yes.
But will there be annual, ongoing training to be able to have people ready for the implementing? Should we be called to duty on it?
Well, if you look in Section 4, it talks about maintenance, and there's a variety of maintenance. The whole plan itself will be updated annually. The facilities will be checked bi-monthly. We really see this as a living, breathing document, in that we're putting it online in a collaboration site. And at any time, if there's a change in facilities or COOP coordinator, and that's really who the key person is on the COOP. Each agency or department has specified a COOP coordinator. Anytime there's a change in that COOP coordinator or a change in the plan online, they will have immediate access to anybody's changes and get a proactive email when a change is made to anybody's COOP plan. So that's going to happen very shortly here. As soon as you bless it, we will put it online and then make that available to everybody on that collaboration site. So there's a variety. As far as specific training on how to execute a COOP, there really is no formalized training out there. The exercise of the development of the COOP, I think, was the best training we could go through in the sessions that were held over the last couple of years. And then there'll just be ongoing dialogue and meetings and updating to the plan to keep everyone informed.
Okay.
However, Supervisor, working with the Sheriff's Department, we want to expand the exposure of all of our employees to sort of incident command, as well as what used to be called SIMS, and I guess it's called NIMS now, but it is the whole process of what do you do in an emergency, and EOC. And that kind of training is very helpful for the next step. And I know that the fire chief had offered for a variety of our staff to, in fact, the next time that there's a fire, to go out to the sites so that they can start learning the various functions within those operations. And those same functions will continue to be functions in a continuity of operations program. The need for, resources and information, and how do we deploy them, and all of those kinds of things. So that training will go on, and we will revisit this continuity of operations program on an annual basis. So.
Okay. One last question. On page 135, County Council's tagged plan page, it says in the matrix that all litigation advisor work is indicated as paper records and not digital. Is that something that's purposeful?
Well, we don't second guess each individual department. They do have extensive case files, and they do have a relatively new automated system with content management, and it's potential that this plan was first filled out before their new content management system came in, and that could be an update they need to make as they go forward. But I know it's a combination of both online and extensive paper.
Thank you.
And this process really brought everybody's attention to, I think, what potential vulnerabilities they have within their organization. So it's fairly systematic, and I do have to express my appreciation to all the departments. This was no small feat to get them to focus in on not just filling out the form, but giving some thought to exactly what they would do in the future. So it was a lot of effort, and we had key people who came together and basically had all the departments come in, and we vetted we vetted the plan. We basically said, well, did you think of this? And what about that? And how are you going to handle that? And we identified where we have some places that need further work. Part of that deals with our Information Systems Division and the kind of support that they can give to ongoing operations after a very big calamity, the earthquake presentation that we had a few weeks ago. That kind of calamity is basically, we had departments in, and they are saying, well, you know, my computer will be back up at this point in time, and we're saying, no, your computer will not be back up at that point in time, because you're probably going to be a lower priority in terms of the scale of who we have to respond to. So now, how are you going to continue to operate, given that's the set of circumstances? And there's been some very thoughtful work that has gone into it, which I appreciate.
Just have a question, Mr. Chair. On the, maybe you already touched on this. I know you touched on the background check. But does background check, in this case, become a public document? And the reason I raise the question, if you're a public elected official, everything is open to the public about you.
We specifically asked that question of both the sheriff and county council, and their opinion is no, it is not a public record. So it will be provided to your board only and the CEO's office for dissemination to your board, and it will not be subject to public records disclosure or public records requests.
Yes.
Supervisor Quinn, members of the board, certainly there is the prospect that somebody may make a public records request for a background check, and it may result in litigation, because a contention can be made by someone seeking it that it is a public record. We think that it is protectable, and that in the event of litigation that we will prevail, but as with all litigation, there is no guarantee.
Thank you.
Great. Yes, sir. No, okay. Well, man, I appreciate this. This is a lot of work, and I appreciate all the people that had to get involved to make this thing happen. So leaving this, what you need from us is those people we're going to assign?
Not today.
Not today.
We'll follow up with your office if you approve the plan and its assumption that there is a standby officer.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the actual, there's no approval required for that. State law permits it. You're just blessing the plan that assumes that's in place, and your actual approval comes when you appoint the standby officer.
Okay, great.
Of that particular nuance.
Yes.
I would move the recommended action with the comment that I hope we never have to use it.
Yeah.
But we have to be ready, and certainly the citizens need it. And this is not the kind of work that's easy to get everybody motivated for. You know, it's hard to get fired up about, hey, that was a satisfying day working on a contingency possibility. So my compliments for getting it all organized. And so
I agree. Well, we'll go ahead and vote on that. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Okay. Number 31.
Chairman Foy, honorable members of the board, and CEO Robinson. My name is Dan Richards. It is my honor to stand before you in my 4th month of service to the county, as I have taken the Deputy CIO position that Rick Jackson held, and am now operating with responsibility for network services. What I'd also like to do briefly before we start is introduce Scott Allison, who has come to support me in my first standing or meeting with the board, to simply ensure that I have presented information correctly from a historical perspective. Scott has the title of Wireless Chief, and it is his follow-through and effort that has kept us on track with this project, and his contribution to this has been invaluable, and I'd like to recognize that briefly. What we are asking today is approval of leases and agreements that surround certain sites that we're building for the upgrade of the microwave project. The map you see now is simply a representation, and I want to bring you up to speed briefly. I know you look at a lot of projects, and I think maybe a brief glance backwards as to when we first put this together might be appropriate. What you're seeing there, the triangles are really our current 6 sites that we use for microwave and wireless. And this is for public safety. It is for fire and sheriff communications. If we go to the next slide, we'll see the propagation, or really the coverage that that generates. And obviously you see some spots throughout the county. The next slide is a representation of just those sites that we're adding, and what you'll see on there.
Could you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
Which one's the coverage? The dark area is the coverage?
The dark area is the propagation of the coverage.
Great, thank you.
And this is a representation of what's called a propagation map. And a propagation map, quite simply, is an engineering effort to calculate coverage based on potential sites that you might have. In this case, it's based on actual sites. The next slide are the actual sites we're putting up. And as you see, it's certainly not a circle, but they are interconnected. We've gone now from 6 sites to 18 sites. The next slide gives you, difficult to see, but gives you somewhat of an idea what it looks like within the geographic confines of the county. And the next slide shows you the improvement in propagation, definitely an advantage. To also provide additional backup information, the microwave radio upgrade project was approved by your board on March 13th, 2007. Then there was an additional presentation to upgrade some of the cost adjustments, and that was approved on May 13th. And what we're doing fundamentally in support of the microwave upgrade project, we are expanding from 6 sites to 18 sites. Due to the network expansion, there are multiple lease agreements and memorandums of understanding that we are presenting to your board for approval in support of this expansion. The multiple lease agreements reflect the coordination of multiple state and county agencies for use of these microwave site locations. What we would like to do, and I can do, is simply go through each lease, or I can simply stop for a second and ask you if you have questions.
Better if you ask if we have questions. I think we understand that you know the leases probably better than us. So. Anybody have any questions?
I know that there have been proposals for 2, I believe, of these towers as part of this network. One in Oak Park on the fire station there, and one in Yerba Buena in the Malibu on top of that, in that fire station location also.
Okay.
And they are not part of these leases that are coming forward, and I know that there still has to be some vetting in the community. I believe the Oak Park one was abandoned as not being needed at this time. Still looking at the one in Malibu. And the question that I have, the idea of co-locating these towers on top of or right next to fire stations, is there a issue regarding like EMF, for example?
EMF in what regard?
In regards to public health. If you're
Are you
going to
talking
be living in the fire station, you know, sleeping in it and all that, is there any issues of having one of these towers over you?
Not really. There are deployments of wireless towers and facilities like that throughout the county, throughout the state, throughout the country. Typically where we're focusing these towers in elevated locations, and any radiation or any, we can call it ERP, affected radiated power, is usually focused more on a point-to-point above the head than it is down on the ground. So as part of the site work that we do, one of the things we have to do is look at environmentals as well. And what that really means is, are we causing harm to someone? Are we compromising safety? And in that case, no, we are not. And we have engaged with consultants and experts to ensure that the way that it is configured is appropriate for the public good.
Thank you. And I would think ideally, if you had a choice, the preference would be to have it away from places that are inhabited.
That's called not in my backyard. Put a tower wherever you want, just don't put it in my backyard. And there's a combination of things. We do have limited locations we can go in. And if you go through the wireless build-out process, typically one of the first things you'll do is you'll look at the desired coverage area. And then having done that initial study, and it's really called a propagation study, you then look for search areas inside your desired coverage area that will give you the coverage that you're looking for. Search areas can be fairly small or fairly large depending on the technology that's being deployed. In this case, we really had sites that were available to us, and so the propagation was designed around that. So we really have limited places we can go in if we're going to get, I guess, what I call the bang for the buck that we're looking for with this particular networking system. But I do understand your concern. It's my concern as well. I live in Thousand Oaks in your district, so I have children. I want to make sure that they're safe. I want to make sure that we ensure the safety of firemen and policemen, and it is, or the sheriff, and it is this project, I think, in its scope and what it really is designed to do, which is improve the communications, the first cry for help, the coordination of emergencies, the response by our emergency teams. All of those things are made possible in an improved manner with this network. So I think it's really a project that I'm glad to see happen, both as an employee and a taxpayer. I'm very pleased to be involved with this.
And it is wonderful to be able to see the amount of area that will be covered and realize that you have some tremendous holes out there right now. So we certainly, as a board, have already supported this project, but I just want to make sure we're doing the best in siting. Thank you for your answer.
Oh, and thank you for your support. I think everyone involved appreciates that. And it's truly been an interagency effort. We've had Public Works, us, Fire, Sheriff, County of LA, the state, all working on this. And it's really been, while an effort to pull together, it's been something that's well worth doing.
Well, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Move the recommended action.
We've got a motion and a second. But I want to say thank you, too, and I know public safety is important. I know a lot of those guys out there are concerned when they can't get a radio signal and for themselves and for what they want to do for somebody else. So I appreciate this being done. All right, so we'll vote, and I'm sure your map is up, but there you go.
Excellent.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate
Thank you.
Good to see you. We'll see you here again.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay. We have a couple people sitting right here. We'll go real quick. Can you guys get through this quick? Okay. Number 32.
Chair Foy, members of the board, and CEO Robinson. My name is Tom Legier. I'm the director of the Watershed Protection District. And here on this item to bring before you, the district recently was notified that the Virginia Colony Flood Storage and Habitat Enhancement Project received a $1 million grant of funds from the Flood Protection Corridor Grant Program. The project will provide low-impact detention along the Arroyo Simi upstream from Moore Park, and will help reduce flood potential, especially in the city of Moore Park. And it also has a component that will increase groundwater retention recharge, and parks and recreation opportunities, and also habitat enhancement opportunities. The district is now requesting your authorization to apply for a grant from the California River Parkways Grant Program in the amount up to $2 million, and also with this action to apply for a grant of up to $1 million from the Urban Streets Restoration Grant Program. These funds will be used primarily to acquire land rights needed for this project as it is implemented. So I'll be happy to respond to any questions you have.
Yeah. Looks like we have a motion and a second. So it's always great when people start handing out money like that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then we have our next one, 33.
Yes, Chair Foy, members of the board, and CEO Robinson. My name, for the record, is Tom Legier. I'm the director of the Watershed Protection District. In 2005, your board approved an $8 million agreement between the district and the Corps of Engineers to complete pre-construction engineering and design phase for the Matilaha Dam Eco Restoration Project. The district has partnered with the California Coastal Commission for funds for the initial phases of this project, and now is coming before you seeking authorization to apply to the Wildlife Conservation Board for an amount, a $1 million grant to be used in meeting the Corps' match for the completion of this phase of the project. So I'm here and be happy to respond to questions.
Okay. That's great.
Okay.
You guys can vote? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
And that's good. Go get your millions. All right, we have a, can we do real quick here? Roberta will do this. We have a 9:45 time certain. Oh, yeah, let's just move correspondence real quick. Do we have a motion for that? I'll move it. Okay. Second. Okay. Then let me do this real quick. This is a presentation for our auditor controllers, an award that was given to Christine Cohen, the award for a financial reporting achievement from the Government Finance Office and Association. This was done at the right around the 1st of September. The award for the financial reporting achievement is presented by Government Finance Officers Association that has over 15,000 government finance professionals that are involved with it. This certificate of achievement and excellence in financial reporting, I think that's great to hear. One of the greatest things about this too is that this office from the Auditor Controller's Office has received this award for 24 consecutive years, which means that they're doing a great job. And I congratulate you for doing such a wonderful job that you can get something that consistently. It shows that we have responsible people doing responsible work, and it just makes us as a county look good. So I congratulate you all, and Christine, for what's happened. Do you have any comments? You want to go down? And yes, good. I'll come down and give this to you.
Thank you, Chair Foy, members of the board, Marty. 24 years is a long time, and I do recall those awards that were not consecutive before that. Yes, I've been in this office 29 years next month, and this has been one of the goals for the office every year. It is hard work. It is work that goes on the entire year, between the planning, the field work, the actual external auditors that come out and look at our financial statements, to the single audit that is filed with the federal government, as well as the financial statements that your board is presented with. And I would encourage each board member and the CEO and anyone else to give us some pointers if there are things in the financial statement that you would like to see more information on, or the frequency on, to let us know about that, so we can help you help the public to better understand the financial statements of the county. And thank you very much.
I do want to say that to do something that consistently, it's always, they say, it's hard to get there, but I think it's harder to stay at the top because you get complacent. And I do want to say congratulations to all your staff, too.
If I could bring them up.
Yes, let's bring them all up, yes.
Come on up. Joanne McDonald is the Deputy Chief in charge of financial reporting, and Katie O'Keefe is the person in charge of putting together the CAFR every year, and the whole staff, the whole group. So if we could get a good picture, that would be wonderful.
Let's get over here. As soon as we get here, no one run.
You may.
How about if we take a 5-minute break? Thank you. All right, we'll come back to order, and then we will go to our 10 o'clock time certain. Supervisor Bennett?
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be able to do all three of the resolutions that I get to do this morning. And the first one is the proclaiming of November 2008 Adoption and Permanency Month. We do it annually here in Ventura County, and we're certainly pleased to have two judges join us here today, and with a number of other people here. Judge Terry Cody, Juvenile Dependency Judge, Presiding Judge Toy White, and Judge Coleman's not here, I believe. Right, good. I don't see Judge Coleman here. The Deputy Executive Officer, Cheryl Canisar, good, she's here also joining us. From the Human Services Agency, Deputy Director Judy Weber. Judy, are you out there? Good, thank you. Program Manager over Adoption Program, David Weinreich. Adoption Supervisor, Diana White. Lead Social Worker, Davy Barazo, thank you. Social worker Cynthia Morelli and social worker Ruth Gonzalez. Would you all stand up, please, so we could recognize you, all you social workers there sitting together. Great, thank you. And then we have adopted families, Glenda Caracas, adopted a 13-year-old sibling, and are you here today? I just need to know. She's not here. Okay, good. That influences our presentation here today. I'm going to ask our two judges to come up, if you could, please, and the executive officer from the court, along with Judy Weber. Judy, would you come down and represent the Human Services Agency for us, please? And as they are there, I just want to point out a few facts before I turn it over to them for their comments. But the reason we do this is because it is such an ongoing issue in the state of California, in this country, in the state of California, and here in Ventura County. And when you hear these statistics I'm going to read to you, it'll remind you that every day we have an important job here on the Board of Supervisors, we have an important job there in the courts, an important job with the Human Services Agency, and that is kids who don't know anything about county government become completely dependent upon the decisions made by all of us with regards to their future. But there are 490,000 reports of child abuse and neglect every year in California. 25,000 children enter foster care every year in California. 75,000 children in California today are living apart from their families in child welfare supervised out-of-home care. That's 75,000 kids in the state of California living that way. Half of the children in foster care in California have been away from their families for 2 or more years. 34,000 children are leaving foster care in 2007. 54% of those were reunited with their families, 22% were adopted. So success for nearly 3/4, if you count success as getting back with their families or adopted, but that still means 1/4 of those children not having that success as they're leaving the foster care system. So the Judicial Council of California is committed to working with the governor, the legislature, the local courts. The California Blue Ribbon Commission on Children in Foster Care was appointed by that Judicial Council to do this. We're making efforts, and we'd sure love to hear from the two of you about where we are, what we as the Board of Supervisors ought to know about this issue in our sort of annual update from you and recognition of the importance of this. So turn it over to you two, and I'll bring this resolution down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Bennett, and thank you all for recognizing November as National Adoption and Permanency Month. It's something that's done nationally. We always do it here in Ventura County also, and again, I thank you for doing that because it focuses on the need for more families who are willing to step forward and help our children that are in our system by providing a permanent home by way of adoption. And it's something that we do. We have adoptions every week. It's one of the happy ways that we end our week on Friday afternoons. And I didn't know I was allowed to come here and ask for anything, so I didn't have a list of anything. We always need your support in whatever way you can provide it to support our adoptions, to support HSA, who of course is behind all of them. If we can't return children to their families and be safe, then the law says the next most favorable option is adoption, and that's what we try to achieve with all of our cases. with all of our children, no matter their needs. And we're pretty darn successful, I think. So again, I thank you very much. I want to point out that we have, all of our adoptions are normally confidential, but on November 21st, which is what we do every year, we open it up to the public. We invite the press. We let all the families know that we're going to let the public in, but it's a very happy day. So if you want to see how these adoptions work, meet some of the families and some of the children, you're very welcome to come attend on November 21st. And then on November 8th, I believe, is it Saturday or Sunday?
Saturday.
If anybody is interested in adoption or learning about how it works, or even yourself considering it, you can go to the Pacific View Mall. They're going to have a fair, an adoption fair, and there's going to be all kinds of groups with booths that you can get information about. So again, thank you very much for recognizing November as National Permanency and Adoption Month.
Yeah, I'd like to echo my thanks to the board. I'm very excited to announce that our agency exceeded our goal of 79 adoptions per year. We actually completed 95 adoptions last year, and there's currently 175 kids who are in the adoption system, hoping to be made, unified with an adoptive family. So we're very excited about that. And I actually do have a parent here. Her name is Vicki Gonzalez, and so I want to give her the time to just tell you a short story about her family.
Good morning. My name is Vicki Gonzalez, and I'm the happy adoptive mother of two wonderful children that I got through the agency here in Ventura County. I just have to say that I'm already going to start crying, and I promise myself not to cry, but my children are wonderful. They came from a situation that was not very positive from the beginning, and through the county and through all the assistance I received from the social workers within the agency, and they've just basically fulfilled mine and my husband's lives. My daughter is 9, and I've had her since she was 6 months old. And my son, who was recently adopted this July, he's 3 years old. And they're the lights of my life. They're wonderful children. They're perfect children in my book. I just wanted to thank the social workers and the agency here for at least allowing me to become a parent, or allowing us to have a family. And I just feel very blessed, and I encourage anyone out there who would like to adopt to contact the agency, because there's so many children in need. Or, if not, to become a foster parent. If you have some space in your home, if you have more love to give, I encourage you to be a foster parent, because I'm also a foster parent too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you could come up and represent foster parents in our picture that we're going to take. And I want to take this final moment to just mention to the board, as you heard this parent talk about this, I think from our perspective it reminds us that not only you, people that become foster parents, adoptive parents, and the social workers that are helping to make these connections, you're literally doing God's work out there for these kids, and so we have to thank you very much. So could we have the three of you up for a picture here, please?
Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
We're going to work our way chronologically through the life cycle here. First, you got to get them adopted and taken care of, and then you've got to teach them how to read. And With that, we have some people here, but a real honored guest that we have here, Claudia Harrison, Executive Director of the First Five Commission. I'd like to ask Claudia to come down. And I will just quickly read this resolution and then ask Claudia to talk to us about the efforts being made to really push the importance of reading early and reading aloud to children. And after having more and more experience with that, I've become a hands-on true believer in terms of how much of an impact it can make. And we really need to get this message out everywhere in Ventura County. But there are 68,000 children, 0 to 5, in Ventura County. First 5 years of life are critical to their development. The seeds of interest and ability to read may be planted and nurtured in the early years, and that's when it's really critical that it happens. So we're really trying to encourage families of all backgrounds to recognize the positive effects of parents and caretakers reading aloud to children, and making sure that they push the envelope in terms of this. And Claudia, would you grace us with your sage advice here as we move forward?
Thank you very much. I can't help but start by saying I'm so happy to be here today because as an adoptive parent, one of my happiest Friday afternoons was the Friday afternoon that they speak about, and so it just took me right back to 11 years ago. So anyhow, to continue that life cycle, good morning, Chair, members of the board. And on behalf of First Five and all of our early literacy partners, I would like to sincerely thank you for your proclamation and naming November as Early Literacy Month. Most of all, thank you for your partnership in helping us get this message out to read early, read aloud to our young children. Please allow me to introduce some of our partners who are here with us today. We have 4 representatives from our local Neighborhoods for Learning. Maybe you can just briefly stand. Brenda Hunter from Conejo Valley, Kathy Puccetti from Ventura, Rafaela Frausto from Pleasant Valley, and Mary Lynn Balin from Moore Park Simi Valley. We also have staff, Jennifer Johnson, our Director of Operations, Petra Pulse, our Program Manager, Robin Godfrey, our Director of Special Projects, and Karen Cayley, who's been helping us with this project. Not only do we have the wonderful group here today, but our partners include the public library systems throughout the county, but most importantly, the Ventura County Public Library System, and we thank you for that. Our Reach Out and Read program, the Ventura County Star, 805 Moms, Barnes & Noble, Borders, and the Pacific View Mall, to name just a few of people who are really gathering with us together on this campaign. Not only are we doing this locally, but as we did last year, we're doing this in concert with 8 First Five Southern California commissions throughout the region and really banding together to get this message out. Who among us doesn't remember a good children's book? Perhaps it was a book that you read to a child, or perhaps it was a book that was read to you. And most probably there's phrases from that book that still come to you and have been part of your life. I confess in our house, we say, I love you, up to the moon and back. One of our favorites that came from an early children's book. They become part of our life. What we know is that reading aloud is the singular most important activity that you can do to build the knowledge required for success in later reading. Early language lays the foundation for reading. And how do we get early language? We get it through hearing words, being read to, and through human interaction. Research tells us that the more words that an infant of 8 months old hears, the better vocabulary that he or she will have at the age of 3. Pretty phenomenal. Yet, we also know that every year 35% of children nationally start school without the skills they need to be able to read. And who are most at risk? Minority and low-income children. First Five has made a significant investment in early literacy programs throughout the year. We have programs in our Neighborhoods for Learning where we really work with groups of mothers and children together, fathers too. And what we've seen from these groups is that we see the impact. We see at the end of these programs that parents report reading to their children significantly more often than they were before. So we know that we can have an impact and change behavior. Through our Reach Out and Read program, which is run by the Landon Pediatric Foundation, last year we distributed over 7,000 books, reaching 3,500 children. There's over 30 physicians who participate in this program, many of whom are from the county clinic system. We're reaching the children that need this the most. What happens is through the well child visits, the physician gives the family a book, gives the family a book at their decks while child visit, and all the while talks to parents about the importance of reading. And so that messaging is extremely important. We have a great campaign this year. We began this past weekend at the Pacific View Mall. I encourage you to walk through the mall. There's some great backlit displays. This weekend we had an event that we reached over 300 predominantly low-income families and distributed about 500 books. Next weekend we have the second annual Story Fest hosted by the Ventura NFL. On the 13th, hopefully you've received your invitation to our special VIP event at the Camarillo Public Library. There'll be programs at the Pacific View and Town Center malls. There's programs throughout the local libraries throughout the month. Barnes & Noble will host once again a book fair, and there'll be a signing at Borders. Please check out our website for ongoing information as well as on the postcards I just handed out to you. But most of all, please find a child and read a book to them, because it will impact a lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claudia. And if you'll wait right there, I want to bring this resolution down, and I'm going to ask the chair to hold this item open while I'm down. I'm going to go do the in-home support services also. Then when I come up, I have some other comments I want to make about this reading aloud program. Thank you very much.
Can I invite our partners? Please come down. For the picture. Everybody. Thank you very much.
I have a card up there.
Yeah, I'm still working on that too, Mr. Williams, right, okay. This is a proclamation, excuse me. This is a proclamation recognizing the In-Home Support Services Caregivers Recognition Week that is an annual celebration also. And Robert Jenkins, the Executive Director of the Authority.
Number 22,
I'm coming back to 21.
He has left that open, so we're okay.
Okay, all right. I'm not done with 21 yet, but I just want to do this while I'm down here, right? Hi, Mr. Jenkins, right? And then also in attendance, just to recognize them, Linda Henderson, would you put your hand up, please? Don Rollins Summers, is Don here? No, okay. Chris Aguilar, great. Kathy Seeley Wagner, okay, and Kathy Young, right? Okay. Well, thank you. All of these people participate in the public authority in terms of helping with the in-home support services?
Part of the adult services team for HSA.
Great, all righty. And so I'm going to ask you to talk about this very important service. We have had numerous conversations about it with the Board of Supervisors as we're trying to put our budget together, as we have our conversations in closed session, et cetera. And I think that the board is very appreciative of having people that are at the other end of the spectrum. We started here with the adoption side of it, then it's the reading, and now it's dealing primarily with elderly people, but not exclusively, but primarily with elderly people that are having problems and need that help to be able to stay in their home and reduce the cost to the state of California and everybody else. So if you'd pass that on, I'd appreciate that. Present this resolution. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to start by number one saying I, too, have been a foster parent for a long time and the 13-year guardian of 12-year guardian of a 13-year-old boy. So on that side, I also give respect. I also would like to introduce my staff. Marissa Martinez, Marina Duarte Robeson, then behind her is Wanda Hernandez Maldonado, Jessica Moncayo, Graciela Romero, April Dueñez, and Yvonne Aguilar. Blanca Grajeda and Maria Carbajal were not able to make it. They are in the East County. Today, again, I'm very pleased to be here in front of you folks to just say thank you for supporting our providers. They perform such very taxing jobs caring for those who are infirmed or who have disabilities, keeping them in their homes safely as opposed to being institutionalized in a nursing home or a long-term care facility. We have great partners. We work with APS, Marcy Snyder and her team, long-term care, Medi-Cal, who helps them to become part of the IHSS program. And IHSS and Public Authority are partners in their mission. A lot of times folks just don't have someone who can take care of them. They don't have a family member or a friend or a church member, and that's when they call on the Public Authority. So at that point we come in. Some of the things I want to point out over the last 3 years that I've been coming before you folks is when we first started, our department had a training for new providers, and it was 2.5 hours long. And we would get them all trained up and send them out to take on the world. Well, now, thanks to Yvonne, we have a 4-day training where they get good hands-on skills, good information about what is going on when they go out into the homes. And we're going to be adding some new components dealing with mental health and with transferring and mobilization to prevent our providers from getting back injuries, because that seems to be our biggest workers' comp problem. So those are the things that are going on. We service through IHSS more than 3,400 consumers of the IHSS program. We have about 3,200 providers. About 560 are active public authority providers. And we do about 3 million hours of service a year. It's just a little more than that. And that's a lot. And that keeps folks home, safe, hopefully happy, but definitely more healthy than being stuck away. So I just want to say thank you again for recognizing the service that these folks do. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any providers out. I know the last few years we've been able to have them come and give some stories, but I know that they all appreciate it, and we appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And as I looked up, I noticed that not only do we have Linda Henderson here, who is the Director of Adult Family Services, but we have the head of our Human Services Agency here, Barry Zimmerman, and also Melissa Livingston here. So why don't we have your staff come down? We probably don't get a chance for a picture very often. Come on down for a picture here, right? And Barry and Melissa and Linda, if you'd like to join us also, come on down.
The whole team, come on down, adult services. Oh, come on down. Before I leave, I did want to say that our Caregivers Conference and Recognition is Saturday, the 8th, at the Ventura Adult School. So if you can attend, please come down and see us. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
And then if I could go back to one other thing I wanted to do. That's why I asked that we hold open that item on reading aloud, which was the emphasis on how much incidental information children pick up once they get into that habit of reading that pays huge dividends for them for a lifetime. So with that, thank you very much for all three of these items and the board's indulgence for all three of these
Thank
items.
you. We have a card on number 22. And Mr. Williams, that 22 is on early reading, so I would have you keep your comments to that. Thank you.
How much
And
time
you have
do I
a
have
minute and
now?
22 seconds left.
How much?
Minute and 22 seconds.
Minute 22 seconds. Yeah, I talked to the director, and she's going to let me join the program. And what's interesting I didn't hear is what kind of information is read out loud. So I'm going to encourage the First Amendment and the United States Supreme Court to be read aloud, like 491 U.S. 397, 1989.
Please cut.
The court asserted that if there is a bedrock principle underlying the First Amendment, now these kids need to know the First Amendment. It is that government may not prohibit the expression of an idea because society finds the idea offensive or disagreeable. Unquote. That is now the law of the land.
This is early, between 0 and 5 years old. That's what we're talking about here.
How-
0 and 5 years is what this whole item was about. Early reading. Early reading. I'm not sure that a 5-year-old is reading the Constitution. So.
Well, I had a 5-year-old grandson. He sure could understand it. So you mean that they stopped reading out loud? I was in the minor adult program that read out loud.
We are done with our regular agenda. Oh, we have 10:30?
Yes, we have a little.
Oh, yes, we do have a,
just
oh, that's what it is.
Before,
This handsome guy come walking down here, right? We couldn't give him something, sorry.
Chairman Foy, before Mr. Dursey takes you through the cuts that we are talking about doing, I wanted to remind the board and, more importantly, remind the public of how we got to today. Because of the efforts of this board in the past to restructure the foundation of county government, and because of this board's position on not expanding retirement benefits and holding the line and living within our means, this year, when we passed the budget, we were able to, the county budget in June, we were able to say, we're not going to be able to add much, but we are going to be able to live within our means. We are going to be able to provide last year's service levels at this current year's prices. We recognized at that time that the elephant in the room was the state, which had not adopted its budget. And I think over 80 days after it was due, the state did adopt a budget. And the actions that are before you today are results specifically related to that budget action. Part of the philosophy has been that when the state cuts these grants, when the state cuts money, we basically look at them and say, we have to cut them too, so that we cannot absorb the state's work in our base. So that has been the philosophy that we have certainly embraced in the past. And today is not the end of the picture, as was noted earlier in the day. First of all, we have additional ramifications of the state budgets that aren't covered by this letter that we will continue to monitor. And then, of course, there's a little $10 billion problem at the moment, surely to build to something substantially greater than that, because the state did not confront some of the issues the state needed to confront in the last budget rounds. So we expect to have some close and deep conversations with you and your board over the next few months and into the next year as a result of the instability in the national economy and the instability of the state. But I certainly wanted to make the point that here in Ventura County, a lot of the right things have been done to set the foundation for us to deal with these. The issue is some of them are going to be so potentially great
that the ramifications will be far-reaching. So with that, I'd like Mr. Jersey to address himself basically to the impacts of the budget that the state adopted on the county as we know it at the moment.
That's correct, and we do have a little bit of good news is that the impacts here aren't as bad as we originally projected about a month ago. However, the bad news is, of course, the $10 billion issue that we still have out there. We do have 12 recommendations in this board letter, about $990,000 of appropriation adjustments, about 29 positions, and ironically, we're increasing contingency through this process by about $50,000. So it's just the way that the budget is how it works through the budget process that we're actually increasing contingency at this time. A couple specific, I think Marty touched on one item, and that is flexibility. And I think you'll hear throughout this presentation, we'll be back to your board. We'll be back to your board. We'll be back to your board a number of times, probably within the next 3 months. Making adjustments here. We've not included, there's a AAA adjustment that we talked about a month ago that is not in this board letter. We're still working with, the AAA is working with their advisory council to try to determine what areas they're trying to cut. We may be back to your board with that if they can't get mitigating funding for that ombudsman program. So they're trying to work through that. We said we'd wait until AAA met with their oversight committee and try to make some determination. We'll probably be back to your board in that regard on AAA. Human Services Agency, monitoring very closely with the help of the Human Services Agency management. We may be back to your board. We probably will be back to your board based on this $10 billion issue. So we will be back to your board. Our plan right now is to come back to your board in a couple weeks with kind of an overview of the county budget and where we are standing, so to speak, within the first 3 or 4 months of this fiscal year. But these specific recommendations, I think a couple I'd like to point out. The first one is the ocean water testing program. I think our recommendation at this time is to reduce the funding for that ocean water testing program. Resource Management Agency has stopped ocean water testing as of the 31st of October, and they did not do any testing this week. Their approach is that if we're going to do any water testing, we should probably, if we have any money to do any water testing, we should do it during the busy times of the year, and that would be in the summertime. So even though the state water board is, the governor asked the state water board to investigate other sources, those numbers have not come through yet. So we're recommending at this time to go ahead with this recommendation and reduce the funding for that program. If the state water board does come through with some dollars for this program, then we can come back to your board very quickly and re-implement some of these testing programs. The other issue, district attorney, we're cutting a position in the district attorney's office. It's about $95,000 that we're cutting out of the program. They also have an additional $100,000 that they're being cut kind of across the board, a number of different programs that are being cut at the 10% level, a number of different grants that add up to another $100,000. So we're working with the district attorney's office on how they're going to mitigate that $109,000 decrease in revenue. We have not yet eliminated those dollars from their appropriations, but we do know that they have to balance their budget within the year. That's really the two main ones. I think the other one is Human Services Agency. They did actually get funding in excess of what they originally had budgeted for this year. That somewhat offset the decrease in all these other programs that they're cutting. So we're eliminating a bunch of 20 positions in the Human Services Agency. But at this point in time, we're not reducing any appropriations in accordance with their new funding levels that they're getting from the state. AAA is another one that at the state, unspent monies within AAA programs will come back to the state and then reallocated. Our local AAA program is hoping they will get some of that reallocation. So that's another reason that we're kind of holding off on reducing AAA allocations. We'll wait till that one kind of smooths itself out. Again, we're trying to be very flexible with the departments, and so far the managers of the departments have been very proactive in regards to their approach towards spending, and they're trying to clearly keep the costs down, and they're not going crazy with the spending, knowing that there is an overreaching state budget issue. One other point I want to make, and this is some good news actually, and when we talked to your board about a month ago, we were talking about commercial paper rates that went from 1.5% up to 4% almost overnight. Well, overnight again almost, they're back down to, we recently issued at 1.1%. So we're hoping that has stabilized, but we're waiting and we'll give you an update in a couple weeks of what that situation is. So we're back down to where we historically had been as far as our commercial paper rates. Last couple days have been 1.3%, 1.1%. So we're hoping that has stabilized also in the commercial paper area. So again, we'll be back in a couple weeks for your board to give our county update, and just to give you a little preview of that, new car sales are down by 18.5% nationwide compared to 2007. And then, those are clearly commercial. New car sales have a double impact, and one is the vehicle license fee and one is the sales tax. So those will be some issues that we'll be discussing in a couple weeks. If you have any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
Ocean testing then has stopped as of now.
That's correct. They have not done any testing this week. That's right.
I wanted to compliment Mr. Zimmerman. As you know, Barry took the helm of the Human Services Agency last spring. He walked in the door at a time when cuts were being talked about, and working with the management staff that was there, he looked very carefully about what he needed to do over the ensuing months. And it's no small feat that this is before us today, without having to lay people off and without having to actually do some cuts, because they already tried to rein in expenses. So I compliment you on making that effort, and I appreciate the endeavor. And isn't it exciting taking over a new agency?
Opportunist.
Grabbed it right at that key time.
That's right.
I have a question regarding the Williamson Act. I'm not quite sure how this reads, other than we're decreasing some funds by $60,000. Is that to make up for the state's reduction in Williamson Act money?
The Williamson Act is a $30,000 decrease in our revenue. That's what we call a general purpose revenue. We get money from the state. We budgeted like $330,000. We're expecting now to get $300,000 from that subvention from the state for the Williamson Act properties. So we're getting $30,000 less than what we originally anticipated. So we're pulling that money out of contingency to cover that shortfall.
Is that the first time this has happened?
They've threatened for a number of years to totally eliminate the Williamson Act. We were never that scared, so to speak, because of the fact that it's only $300,000 to us, only is a relative number compared to our general purpose revenues of $320 million. It is really a drop in the bucket relative to the big dollars. Clearly, $300,000 is a nice amount to have, but relative, it's not significant. And yes, they have threatened a number of times to totally eliminate the program, and that probably could still be out there.
It is a very beneficial program. As we can see, so many have entered into it, and this allows them to get reduced property taxes for putting aside their land and not developing it and keeping it in agriculture for the most part.
That's correct.
Yeah, the issue really is that the state shared the burden at a higher level than they're going to share the burden of moving those lands into Williamson Act in the future by the 10% reduction. So basically, we got this supplement as a result of losing that assessed value, and now we're going to get less.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple of questions. On the water testing issue, if in fact the State Water Board acts as quickly as the next week or so, how quickly can we then move back into?
Well, I think RMA, I talked to Bob Gallagher and RMA, and they can move very quickly and start testing right away under the scenario that we know that we're going to get the money. So we'll, assuming that what I understand it to be, that they'll go retroactive, and so we'll be able to cover that. So we'll be able to go right back right away. Does that make sense? Without coming to your board, because they do have the ability to go ahead and start testing without coming back and
Good.
hiring additional people.
Good.
And we didn't eliminate the positions, we just made the positions unfunded
Right.
to deal with
Okay.
the elimination of the positions later.
We certainly have, I mean, it's one of our tourist goals in this county is to certainly have people come to our beaches and be able to assure them they're clean as much as possible. I think it's an important investment. Okay, good. And if there's certainly an opportunity for us to send letters of support to the state board to do so, to assure them that we support them giving us this money. The other one regarding the district attorney and the spousal abuser prosecution grant. You know, I look at this as one that has had great benefit to our county, and I support our grant program. It's just one of those, you know, we've gone from the good, now we're to the bad, and now we're going to the ugly here. As we look at this is the first of what we're going to be facing over the next couple of years, and just as the district attorney has been so successful in getting grants like this that have targeted populations, that we know if we can get in there to assist you know, the issues of spousal abuse, it has other values and savings and both the family strengthening and HSA work that's done. I mean, it's all connected. It's all connected. And it's such very few dollars for significant gain. It's just tragic how we have to make these kind of decisions, and I have to believe that the district attorney will continue to do the very best they can to provide services. So I wish I could say no, don't do this. But
Right, and I think we'll find that as we go along, that, I mean, every program has a constituency, and
absolutely,
and it's a matter, sometimes it's the constituencies that don't have a real heavy voice that end up getting cut. And it's
that's always
unfortunate.
the
Yeah,
case.
and so, correct.
And our nonprofits who are in the community providing some of the same services to these families and to victims of household violence, family violence, they're suffering the same impact to their budgets because of the economy, and it's just, it's the big ugly. That's my comments and questions.
Thank you. I appreciate the questions about the water quality testing, because that was my question. Can we get it going if the funding does happen to come back in? I just wanted to point out two things to the board and to the public as we're beginning this, and that is that we're just beginning this. We've got $10 billion more that they will end up having cut out. We've got sales tax revenue, which is not as big a part, but it certainly is in 172, that it's not going to come in like projected, so it is out there. But the impacts, as Supervisor Long said, are so related. We now have gypsy moth that has come into Ventura County, causing a quarantine, and that they have tracked it back, and they're pretty sure that gypsy moth came through because they closed an ag inspection point on the highway because they had a shortage of funding. So they closed that, and now look at how much the state is going to pay to try to eradicate that gypsy moth. And so, the interrelated side of it, and the sense of, sometimes that's what I mean by we have to make really smart decisions so that sometimes you don't cut on the prevention, and yet most people, there was not a big issue, I'm sure, when that department's budget, received some kind of cut, and all of a sudden that happened. But if you look across the board at the cuts that we're having here, these are real cuts. This is not fat, that somebody says, well, this is surplus government. And I think a real question has to be asked, as the state legislature is called back into session, can they solve the whole problem with just cuts? And I think as you look at this, if there's $10 billion worth of fat there, we're certainly not seeing it in this round of cuts, that we have. The other point that I would like to make is that the fascinating thing is the state creates these priorities and decided to cut, for example, a clean water program. but it is at the county level that people will come and say, don't cut the clean water program. And I just want to try to emphasize to people, if you have programs that are important to you, you've got to lobby your state representatives on those programs. This budget was approved by the California legislature. And everybody that voted for this budget voted to cut this clean water program, not the county of Ventura. We're simply implementing, or the pass-through almost, for these state funds. And it will be impossible for us, as these various groups come forward, for us to be able to say, we'll solve this with the county's funds, we'll solve that with it. There will be some times when we will have to. We'll just say this program is so critical. But there will be many, many times where we will not be able to do that. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming to this. I think that the foresight that we had before about trying to keep, and what you had to do, Barry, there was control some of those positions in the sense they were there. Do we really have to fill them? Makes it nice when we come here. We don't have to really lay people off. It's just not a filled position. But as we go forward, we hear of cuts and cuts. I think the opportunity, though, for us is if we can do more effective efficiencies. I know what our CEO is doing, everybody else, what we've seen the hospital has done to save $25 million, and what GSA has done. We hope that the rest of our different departments can find those kind of savings. It goes back to what Supervisor Bennett said. The idea is that we now still continue to perform those services at the hospital because of those kind of savings, and that's where as these come down, if we can find savings, we don't have to cut programs. And I think that's important for all of us to be looking for those things. Yes. Okay. So we had a motion and a second. Let's vote. We have a card? We do? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me push my speaker. And I see that we have Polly Barman. There you go.
Good morning. I'm Polly Barman. I'm a staff scientist for Heal the Bay. Hopefully you received our comment letter last week. I just wanted to say very briefly that I understand why it's necessary to make these cuts. However, as we speak, the State Board is hearing a proposal to reinstate these funds. It was over $1 million that was cut, and they're actually going to provide funds for 2 years through a couple of propositions and the Clean Beach Initiative. And so this has already been approved by the governor. They've released press releases saying that it's happened. So really we just want to ask that maybe you could postpone recommendation 3 until your next meeting. That way it'll just be a lot easier to get back onto the monitoring as soon as possible. Thank you.
If I could just clarify, my understanding is they've already stopped, and they can start it up. If tomorrow, if we find out that they've done this, we can start it back up. So regardless of what action we take here today, they would. I see.
Is that correct?
So in other words, we've already. It's not like not doing this. If they don't do it, we will now have officially blessed this action. But
here's
go
the
ahead,
man,
Mr. Gallagher.
For the record, Robert Gallagher with the Environmental Health Division. Yes, we can start right back up. We have the person who has been doing the sampling. They've been rotated into another position, but they can go back and we can start back up out of that.
So lobby that regional board to go forward with that.
We are. We're there today, too.
Thank you.
Okay, it's a good point, because this goes back to public safety. People pay their taxes to be safe, to walk outside, safe from criminals, safe, clean water, and those kind of things. So it is a public safety issue for all of us. So I think it's important that we do that. And so I'm glad you can get that back up when it happens. That's good.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So we had a motion, and I think that was our only speaker. You said you were on here now? All right. So, Mr. Dursey, I'm sure we'll hear from you next month or next week or something else after.
Within weeks. Would staff let us know as soon as they hear from the regional board about this water quality testing? We'd appreciate it. All right.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. We'll go into closed session. Do we expect anything out of closed session today?
No, we do not.
No.
No.
Okay. No. Thank you.